My name is Abigail Carter, but everyone calls me Abby. I grew up in a picturesque little town in Vermont, nestled between rolling green hills and winding dirt roads. It's the kind of town where everyone knows your name, and neighbors bake pies for each other on Sundays. Most of my happiest memories are tied to this place, especially to the cozy, quaint house my grandmother Eleanor lived in, a beautiful white cottage surrounded by rose bushes, lavender fields, and majestic maple trees. Grandma Eleanor wasn't just any grandmother, she was my rock, my mentor, and my best friend. Growing up, I spent every summer at her house, playing in the garden, baking cookies in her kitchen, and listening to her captivating stories by the fireplace. My parents traveled a lot due to their work, so my grandmother's home always felt more like mine than anywhere else. Eleanor taught me everything, from knitting scarves to identifying constellations, and more importantly, she taught me how to be strong, independent, and kind. I vividly recall long summer evenings spent sitting on her porch swing, sipping fresh lemonade, and watching fireflies dance in the twilight. Her soft voice would float through the air as she recounted tales of her youth, of challenges she'd overcome, of love she had lost and found, and of the profound value of family. Her wisdom was subtle yet powerful, always leaving me with life lessons hidden within ordinary conversations. As Eleanor grew older, I cherished those summers even more. Her health declined slowly, gracefully. Even as age dimmed her energy, it never dimmed her spirit. During my final visits, I promised her faithfully, "I'll keep your home just as you love it, Grandma. It'll always stay in our family." Her eyes twinkled warmly as she squeezed my hand and replied softly, "I know you will, Abby." When Grandma Eleanor passed away, it shattered me. I'd lost not only my grandmother but my closest confidant. However, through her will, Eleanor left me her home. It wasn't just a building, it was her legacy, filled with decades of love, laughter, and the echoes of our shared memories. The responsibility felt heavy, yet beautiful. I moved into the house shortly afterward, settling back into the town I adored, accepting a teaching position at the local elementary school. My life felt calm, stable, and deeply fulfilling. I carefully maintained Eleanor's garden, preserved her antique furniture, and hosted family gatherings during holidays, just as she had. Everything changed when Nathan Reynolds walked into my life. Nate had moved to town temporarily from Boston, working remotely as a financial analyst while exploring new opportunities. He was charming, charismatic, and incredibly attentive. We met at a community festival one bright October afternoon, bonding instantly over our shared love of old movies and apple cider donuts. Our connection was magnetic, almost effortless. Before long, Nate became my constant companion. Friends and family adored him. He seamlessly integrated into my life, accompanying me to school events, tending Eleanor's garden alongside me, and showing genuine interest in preserving the home's history. His care for my grandmother's memory touched me deeply, making me trust him completely. Nate frequently expressed his admiration for my bond with Eleanor, which only deepened my affection for him. After nearly 2 years together, Nate took me on a romantic weekend getaway to Cape Cod. Standing under a pastel sunset by the sea, Nate dropped to one knee, presenting a stunning diamond ring. "Abby," he said earnestly, eyes shimmering with emotion, "you've given me a sense of home I never knew existed. Will you marry me?" I was ecstatic. Overwhelmed with happiness, I quickly said yes. I envisioned a future filled with love, stability, and shared memories built around the home my grandmother had entrusted me with. Nate seemed equally excited, fully committed to our shared vision. Soon after, wedding planning took center stage in our lives. One quiet evening, while discussing wedding plans, Nate mentioned financial security. He gently suggested we formally put both of our names on the house deed, assuring me it was purely for tax benefits. I hesitated briefly, confused about legal details and slightly uneasy about altering the legacy Eleanor had passed solely to me. But Nate explained patiently and convincingly, pointing out that marriage would naturally merge our lives and assets. He reassured me repeatedly that it was purely a technical formality, a practical decision to secure our future financially. Trusting Nate wholeheartedly and envisioning our life together, I agreed. After all, we were becoming partners in every sense, and I felt certain Grandma Eleanor would have approved, as she always championed practicality alongside sentimentality. I signed the papers, adding Nate's name beside mine on the property deed, unaware of how this single decision would eventually alter my entire world. At that moment, however, my future felt bright, stable, and filled with infinite possibilities, exactly the kind of secure life Eleanor had always wished for me. Little did I know, trusting Nate with Eleanor's precious legacy would soon become the greatest regret of my life. When I first met Nathan Reynolds, everyone just called him Nate. It was mid-autumn in Vermont, the trees blazed gold and crimson, and the small town was buzzing with excitement for the annual Harvest Festival. My school colleagues had dragged me out of my comfortable Friday evening routine of grading homework and cozying up with a good book, insisting I join them at the town square. I begrudgingly agreed, unaware that the decision would alter the course of my entire life. The festival was charmingly predictable, booths filled with homemade pies, crafts, local maple syrup, and children giggling wildly as they bobbed for apples. I was laughing at my coworker Lisa's failed attempt at apple bobbing when a tall, smiling stranger caught my eye from across the square. He was leaning casually against a cider stand, hands wrapped around a steaming mug, eyes crinkling as he laughed at something the vendor said. Before I knew it, Lisa nudged me forward, whispering mischievously, "Go talk to him. You deserve some fun." Feeling unusually brave, I approached him, smiling shyly. "Hi, I don't think I've seen you around before," I managed, hoping my nerves weren't obvious. His smile widened instantly, warm and genuine. "New guy in town," he said, extending his hand confidently. "I'm Nate. Just moved here from Boston." We quickly discovered shared interests, bonding instantly over classic films, books, and our mutual love of quiet New England life. Conversation flowed easily, and before the evening ended, we exchanged numbers and promises to meet again. Over the next few months, Nate effortlessly wove himself into my daily routine. He'd surprise me at school with lunch, help grade papers late into the evening, and even charmed my students with impromptu soccer matches during recess. My friends and family adored him. He attended community gatherings, learned my neighbors' names, and became a regular at Sunday dinners. My parents, initially skeptical, quickly fell for his charm and steady presence. We spent countless evenings talking about everything and nothing, curled up on the porch swing my grandmother loved so dearly. Nate showed genuine curiosity about Eleanor, her stories, and her legacy. He respected the love I had for my grandmother's home, and I treasured him deeply for that. Our relationship blossomed effortlessly, a seamless mix of friendship and romance. Nate was stable, ambitious, and affectionate, qualities that reassured and attracted me. He brought comfort and excitement into my quiet life, expanding my horizons with weekend adventures, romantic dinners, and thoughtful gestures. Then came the proposal. One crisp October weekend, Nate whisked me away to Cape Cod. We stayed in a cozy bed and breakfast overlooking the sea. On our first evening, Nate suggested a stroll along the shore. We walked hand in hand, listening to waves gently caressing the sand. At sunset, Nate stopped suddenly, pulling me close. "Abby, meeting you changed my whole world," he said softly, eyes serious but warm. My heart fluttered. "You've shown me what home truly means. I can't imagine life without you. Will you marry me?" He knelt right there, opening a small velvet box to reveal the most beautiful diamond ring I'd ever seen. My heart raced, tears blurring my vision as I whispered, "Yes, of course." Life became a whirlwind of wedding planning. Our friends and families were thrilled. Nate's parents, Richard and Carol Reynolds, welcomed me warmly, inviting us frequently to their home near Boston, treating me as their own daughter. His younger brother, Lucas, was more distant, yet polite. Nate had mentioned Lucas struggled to find direction, but I noticed Nate's protectiveness and decided not to pry. As we planned our future, conversations inevitably turned to finances. Nate was savvy, logical, and always thinking ahead. One evening, over dinner at home, Nate gently mentioned finances again. "You know, Abby, I was thinking," he began carefully, pushing around vegetables on his plate, clearly hesitant. "Once we're married, things naturally merge: accounts, responsibilities, assets. Have you considered how this might impact taxes or legal matters regarding the house?" I paused, fork mid-air, confused. "What do you mean?" "Well, Eleanor's house, it's beautiful, valuable, and I know how much it means to you. But legally, it's solely in your name, which can complicate things financially. My accountant suggested we consider joint ownership, just for simplicity, to avoid complications down the road." My heart fluttered anxiously. Eleanor's home was deeply personal, my tangible link to her memory. "Joint ownership? You mean adding your name officially?" Nate nodded slowly, meeting my eyes calmly. "It would simplify things significantly, especially taxes. Purely practical. It changes nothing emotionally or symbolically." "I promise, Abby." My hesitation was clear. Nate took my hand reassuringly. "We're building a life together. Everything will be shared. Your grandmother would have wanted us secure and happy. I just want to protect you, from any complications." His earnestness convinced me. Nate was logical, meticulous with finances. He'd never led me wrong before. After all, marriage meant partnership. Eleanor always spoke about trust and practicality. Surely, she'd understand. After a few days of thought, I agreed. Nate swiftly arranged paperwork, bringing documents home with detailed explanations. I signed, placing Nate's name beside mine on the deed of Eleanor's beloved home. I told myself repeatedly it was practical and logical, a secure step toward our future. In the following weeks, life resumed blissfully, our dreams seeming within reach. Yet deep inside, an uneasy feeling lingered, an instinctual whisper of caution I chose to silence. After all, Nate loved me deeply, and I trusted him completely. That trust would soon face a test far greater than I could ever have imagined. Life moved swiftly toward our wedding day, yet amidst all the planning and excitement, a strange unease lingered. Initially, I brushed it off as nerves, common for any bride-to-be. Nate continued to be the supportive fiancé I adored, attentive to every detail, charming everyone around us, and showing boundless enthusiasm for our future. But that persistent feeling of unease finally found its reason one quiet Saturday afternoon. Nate had gone golfing with his father, Richard, leaving me alone at home. The sunlight streamed through the windows of my grandmother's home, illuminating dust motes floating lazily through the air. I decided it was the perfect day to clean and organize the house, hoping that bringing order to our shared space would soothe my inexplicable anxiety. After finishing the kitchen, I moved upstairs to Nate's small home office. It was a neatly organized space, reflective of Nate's meticulous nature. Yet, as I dusted the bookshelf near his desk, my elbow accidentally knocked a stack of folders onto the floor. Papers scattered everywhere, skittering beneath the desk and around my feet. Muttering to myself, I knelt to gather them, hastily sorting them back into their folders. That's when I noticed something unusual. A thick folder labeled simply Reynolds Financials had landed open, and my eyes caught the heading Mortgage Agreement at the top of one page. Curious and slightly confused, I began skimming the document. Within moments, my pulse quickened, breath hitching painfully as the truth unfolded line by line. The mortgage was recent, taken out just weeks after Nate's name had been added to the deed. Even more shocking, the house used as collateral wasn't just any property, it was my grandmother Eleanor's home. Our home. The home she had entrusted to me. The room spun slightly as shock settled into my bones. I sat numbly, rereading the document repeatedly, certain I had misunderstood something. My heart raced wildly as dread seeped deeper into my chest. Why had Nate taken out a mortgage without mentioning it? What could have possibly driven him to put Eleanor's legacy at risk? Shaking and nauseated, I scanned the paperwork again. Finally, buried deep within the financial jargon, I found the reason behind this painful betrayal. The mortgage had been taken out to pay off significant gambling debts owed by Nate's younger brother, Lucas. Lucas Reynolds. Nate's troubled younger brother, someone I barely knew, someone who'd always remained distant during family gatherings. Lucas had a reputation for being reckless and irresponsible. Nate had mentioned briefly, almost apologetically, that Lucas had struggles, but he'd never once indicated they were severe enough to jeopardize our financial security. Hot anger mixed quickly with the shock, burning away my disbelief. How could Nate have done this behind my back, knowing exactly how much this home meant to me? A terrible sinking feeling filled my stomach as I realized the depth of his deception. He hadn't just hidden the truth, he'd deliberately lied, exploiting my trust and love to solve his brother's problems. The weight of betrayal was suffocating. I sat on the floor, papers trembling in my hands, tears blurring the words on the page. Memories of Eleanor rushed painfully through my mind, her kind eyes and warm smile haunting me. I imagined the disappointment she would have felt, seeing her precious legacy treated so recklessly. Hours passed like minutes, my anger oscillating between helpless grief and outraged disbelief. Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a dim, melancholic glow over the room, I heard Nate's car pull into the driveway. Panic surged, quickly replaced by fierce determination. I couldn't ignore this, it demanded confrontation. Moments later, Nate entered the house, calling cheerfully from downstairs, oblivious to what awaited him. "Abby? I brought home dinner from the cafe. They had your favorite pie." I didn't respond. Instead, I gathered the papers firmly in my hand, descending the stairs slowly, heart pounding heavily in my chest. Nate stood in the kitchen, unpacking food, smiling brightly as he turned toward me. His expression faltered immediately as he saw my face. "Abby? What's wrong?" he asked cautiously, concern filling his eyes. My voice shook with barely controlled emotion. "When were you going to tell me about the mortgage, Nate?" Instant panic flickered briefly across his face before he regained his composure. He set the food aside, taking a cautious step toward me. "Let me explain." I cut him off sharply. "Explain? You mortgaged my grandmother's house without even mentioning it to me. You jeopardized our future to pay off Lucas's gambling debts?" Nate raised his hands defensively. "Abby, listen, it's not what it seems. Lucas was in trouble, deep trouble. My parents were desperate, and I didn't want to burden you." "You didn't want to burden me?" I repeated incredulously, anger rising sharply. "So you decided to secretly mortgage my family's home, my inheritance, the thing that matters most to me?" His voice softened, pleadingly. "We're getting married. Everything was going to be ours anyway. It's just paperwork, Abby. Family helps family." I stared at him in stunned silence, heartache mingling bitterly with anger. Family helps family? Eleanor was my family, Nate. She trusted me. And now you've betrayed everything she wanted for me. The silence between us grew thick, Nate visibly struggling for words. "I thought you'd understand eventually," he finally whispered, eyes dropping in shame. "I never intended to hurt you." My voice broke, anguish tearing through me. "Well, you did, Nate. You hurt me more deeply than I ever thought possible." That night marked the painful fracture of our relationship, a moment filled with sadness, disbelief, and rage. I saw clearly now how fragile trust could be, shattered entirely by a single act of deception. In one day, the future I imagined collapsed entirely, replaced by uncertainty, pain, and bitter resentment. The man I planned to marry had betrayed my trust profoundly, casting a dark shadow over everything we once shared. And as I stood facing Nate in our kitchen, heartbroken yet defiant, I knew this was only the beginning of the battle to reclaim Eleanor's legacy, and my dignity. The silence that followed Nate's weak apology felt endless, stretching painfully between us. I stood there, gripping the mortgage documents in my trembling hands, heart pounding wildly, 1,000 conflicting emotions clashing inside me. How could you do this to me, Nate? My voice shook with anger and hurt. How could you even think this was okay? Nate hesitated, clearly caught off guard by my intensity. His usual confidence had evaporated entirely, replaced by an uncharacteristic vulnerability. But I refused to let sympathy cloud my judgment. He'd betrayed me profoundly, and I deserved answers. I told you, Abby, it wasn't supposed to happen like this, he muttered, eyes cast downward in shame. It got complicated. Lucas, he owed dangerous people a lot of money. Mom and Dad were desperate. I scoffed bitterly, shaking my head. And instead of talking to me, you went behind my back and put my grandmother's house at risk? He met my gaze, a desperate glint in his eyes. I panicked. I didn't want you involved in my family's mess. You didn't deserve that burden. My chest tightened painfully. Nate's misguided attempt to justify his actions felt hollow, almost insulting. Involved? Nate, I'm already involved. This was supposed to be our home. Eleanor entrusted it to me, Nate. Not you, not your brother, and certainly not his gambling problems. Nate took a cautious step closer, his voice dropping lower. Abby, Lucas is my brother. He's made terrible mistakes, but he's family. I couldn't abandon him when he was in trouble. And that makes it okay to abandon me? To betray my trust and use me like this? My voice rose sharply, anger crackling through every word. I didn't abandon you, Nate protested weakly. I thought after we married, this wouldn't matter. Everything would be ours anyway. I just sped things up. It was never about hurting you. His casual dismissal of my pain ignited fresh fury within me. It wouldn't matter? You took away my choice, Nate. You lied to me, manipulated me, and now you expect me to accept it as some misguided act of love? He flinched, startled by my raw anger. I'm sorry, Abby. Truly. I should have told you. But I didn't see another way out. You should have trusted me. My voice cracked painfully. We could have faced this together. Instead, you chose deception. How am I supposed to trust you ever again? The question lingered heavily, unanswered, echoing in the painful silence. Nate stood before me, utterly defeated. The man I'd loved deeply, who had been my safe harbor, now looked unfamiliar, a stranger wearing a mask of regret. Finally, Nate spoke, voice almost pleading. Please, Abby, give me a chance to make it right. Lucas promised he'd pay it back eventually. My parents swore they'd help. We'll fix it together. It'll be okay. A harsh, incredulous laugh escaped me. Lucas will pay it back? Your brother, who's proven repeatedly that responsibility is meaningless to him. You honestly expect me to believe that? Nate faltered, clearly aware of the truth in my words but unwilling to admit it. I have to believe he'll come through. I can't just give up on my family. You already gave up, I snapped bitterly, tears stinging my eyes again. You gave up on us the moment you decided this was acceptable. He winced visibly, voice barely above a whisper. I never meant to lose you, Abby. Well, congratulations, I said coldly. You've done exactly that. I don't even know who you are anymore. Nate stepped back as if struck physically, realization finally settling into his eyes. What does that mean, Abby? You're ending us? I swallowed painfully, the truth feeling heavy yet undeniably clear. How can we possibly move forward from this, Nate? You didn't just betray my trust, you destroyed it. You put your family's problems above our future without even considering my feelings. Eleanor's home was sacred to me, and you knew that. You knew how much it meant. Please, Abby, Nate's voice trembled genuinely now, desperation evident. Don't do this. We can fix it. I shook my head, tears spilling over uncontrollably. You've broken something that can't be fixed, Nate. Trust isn't something you glue back together once it shatters. You made this choice. Now we both have to live with it. The room filled with heavy silence again, the painful reality settling over us. Nate stood motionless, as though frozen by my words, the weight of his actions pressing down visibly on his shoulders. Finally, gathering what little strength I had left, I spoke clearly, firmly. I need you to leave, Nate. I can't deal with this right now. I need space to figure out what comes next. He looked up, eyes pleading once more. Abby, please don't do this. Let's talk more tomorrow. Give it time. I've heard enough, I interrupted sharply. You don't get to dictate how I deal with the damage you've done. Go, Nate. Please. Slowly, painfully, Nate stepped back, gathering his things silently. At the doorway, he paused, looking back once more, eyes filled with regret. For whatever it's worth, Abby, I am truly sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I couldn't respond, my heart aching painfully in my chest. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone in Eleanor's house, surrounded by echoes of happier times now tainted forever by betrayal. I sank onto the floor, tears finally flowing freely, grief overwhelming me. Anguish and anger mixed bitterly, my mind spinning endlessly. The man I'd planned my future with had violated something sacred, and nothing could erase that truth. As night descended fully, shadows enveloping the familiar rooms, I knew this wasn't just a painful confrontation, it was the end of everything I'd believed about our life together. Trust, once lost, was irretrievable. Nate's betrayal had fractured something fundamental, altering our future irreversibly. Yet beneath the crushing weight of despair, a tiny spark ignited inside me, defiance. Eleanor had raised me to be strong, resilient. She'd taught me never to let anyone diminish my worth. Even in heartbreak, her voice whispered softly in my mind, urging me forward. In that quiet darkness, though broken and betrayed, I knew one thing for certain, I wouldn't let Nate's actions destroy Eleanor's legacy or define my future. This battle was far from over, it had only just begun. In the days following the painful confrontation with Nate, I found myself emotionally drained, barely able to grasp the magnitude of what had happened. My life, previously filled with joyful anticipation of our wedding, now lay in shambles. Yet despite the pain and betrayal, nothing prepared me for the avalanche of reactions I would soon face from the people around me, especially Nate's family. The first blow came swiftly, just 2 days after Nate moved out. I was sitting at my kitchen table, nursing a cup of cold coffee, when my phone rang. The caller ID flashed Nate's mother's name, Carol Reynolds. My heart sank. Carol and Richard had always been warm, welcoming, treating me as their own daughter. But I knew this conversation would be anything but pleasant. I took a deep breath, reluctantly answering the call. Hello, Carol. Abby, Carol began stiffly, her usually gentle voice sharp and cold. We need to talk. I closed my eyes briefly, preparing myself. I assume this is about Nate. It's about family, Carol replied pointedly, her voice carefully controlled. What happened between you and Nate is devastating, but I hope you understand what family means. My jaw tightened. I know exactly what family means, Carol. Eleanor taught me that better than anyone. Then you should understand Nate's actions, Carol said sternly. He was protecting Lucas. Family stands by each other, especially during crises. I won't condone lying, but surely you can appreciate his intentions. Anger flared hotly in my chest. Appreciate his intentions? Carol, he took out a mortgage on my grandmother's home behind my back. He risked my family's legacy without a second thought. Your grandmother's home was about to become your joint home, she countered quickly. Marriage means partnership. Yes, Nate made mistakes, but he acted from love and loyalty to his brother. I exhaled shakily, frustration rising. And loyalty to me? Where was that? Carol's voice softened slightly, almost patronizing. He didn't intend to hurt you. Lucas made poor choices, yes, but he deserves forgiveness. Nate did what family does, help. Helping Lucas at my expense is not acceptable, I replied firmly. My grandmother trusted me to preserve her home. It wasn't Nate's to mortgage. You're thinking selfishly, Abby, Carol snapped, losing patience. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for family. We hoped you would understand this. I sat stunned, hurt mingling with indignation. You're calling me selfish? Nate betrayed my trust. He lied, manipulated me, and you expect me to just accept that? Carol's silence was thick, charged. Finally, she sighed deeply. I'm sorry you feel betrayed, Abby, but holding grudges won't help anyone. Families forgive. They move on. I can't just move on, Carol, I whispered sharply. Nate crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. He chose Lucas's problems over our relationship, over my family's legacy. I can't forgive that. Then you never truly understood what marriage and family mean, Carol replied coldly, clearly hurt but defiant. Maybe we were wrong about you. The line went dead. Carol's words lingered bitterly, reinforcing the loneliness I felt. Nate's betrayal had cost me more than just our relationship, it had ruptured the bond I'd built with his family. Yet the worst wasn't over. Later that evening, another call came through, this time from Lucas himself. I reluctantly answered, resentment already simmering. Abby, it's Lucas, his voice hesitant but firm, strangely entitled. I heard about everything, and I'm sorry. I scoffed sharply. Sorry? Your reckless actions are the reason Nate risked my inheritance. He sighed audibly. I know. But you need to realize how bad things were. I owed dangerous people a lot of money. Nate saved my life. You should be proud of him, not angry. Proud? I echoed incredulously. Proud that he deceived me, endangered my grandmother's legacy, and jeopardized our entire future? You think your irresponsibility justifies his betrayal? Family does whatever it takes, Lucas insisted, voice edged with entitlement. I didn't ask him to involve you, but you're about to be his wife. This isn't just his family now, it's yours. My temper flared again. You have no right lecturing me about family. Nate might tolerate your irresponsibility, but I won't. My grandmother's home was never yours to risk. Lucas laughed bitterly, arrogance creeping into his voice. You don't understand loyalty, Abby. Maybe you never will. Nate deserves someone who supports him, not someone who runs at the first sign of trouble. You're right about one thing, Lucas, I snapped coldly. I won't blindly support betrayal. And I won't be manipulated by guilt. You and Nate made your choices, and now I'm making mine. Lucas fell silent, clearly taken aback by my defiance. Eventually, he spoke quietly. You're making a mistake, Abby. Nate deserves better. No, I countered fiercely. I deserved better. Eleanor deserved better. Your reckless choices aren't my responsibility. I hung up abruptly, heart racing, anger and hurt flooding my veins. Yet the blows kept coming, friends and neighbors subtly suggesting forgiveness, awkwardly siding with Nate's narrative. Even my own parents, though sympathetic, cautiously hinted I consider forgiving Nate's mistake, emphasizing marriage's complexities. We know you're hurt, Abby, my mother said gently one afternoon, her voice hesitant. But Nate made a bad decision under pressure. Maybe he deserves a second chance. Her words stung deeply. He lied, Mom. He put Eleanor's home at risk for Lucas. How can I trust someone capable of that? My father sighed softly. We're not defending what he did. But marriage is complicated, and Nate's family, his brother, put him in an impossible position. I was his family, too. I shouted, emotions spilling uncontrollably. Doesn't anyone see that? The silence that followed was heartbreaking. Even my own parents didn't fully grasp the depth of my pain, the gravity of Nate's betrayal. As days passed, the pressure became suffocating, friends, family, and acquaintances urging reconciliation, subtly blaming me for refusing forgiveness. But despite their pleas, I knew deep down I couldn't compromise Eleanor's legacy, my self-respect, or my dignity. This ordeal taught me a bitter truth: sometimes standing your ground means standing alone. Yet Eleanor had taught me strength and resilience. If fighting for her memory meant losing Nate's family, or even mine, I was prepared. Because honoring Eleanor's trust mattered more than anyone else's approval. Weeks had passed since the confrontation, each day heavier than the last, filled with bitter confrontations, whispered gossip, and relentless family pressure. Despite Nate's attempts at reconciliation, I found myself unable to move past his betrayal. Every call from him, every message pleading forgiveness, only deepened the wound rather than healed it. One crisp morning in early spring, I awoke with absolute clarity: this painful limbo couldn't continue. Eleanor had always taught me that integrity meant standing up for yourself, even when everyone else turned their backs. She'd been strong, unapologetically true to herself. It was my turn now. I knew exactly what I had to do. Gathering every ounce of courage, I made the first call, canceling our wedding venue. My voice trembled slightly as the receptionist gently expressed sympathy, her words hollow against the backdrop of my shattered dreams. Next came the florist, then the caterer, and finally our photographer. Each cancellation echoed painfully, but also strengthened my resolve. With every step, I reclaimed a piece of my dignity. After hours of emotionally exhausting calls, only one remained, the most difficult one yet. Taking a deep breath, I dialed Nate's number. "Abby?" His voice was tentative, hopeful, sending a painful jolt through me. "Nate," I began firmly, refusing to allow my voice to waver, "I'm calling to tell you I've cancelled the wedding." He fell silent, the shock palpable through the phone. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke, voice strained. "Abby, please reconsider. Don't do this." "I didn't do this, Nate," I replied quietly, tears threatening to betray my composure. "You did. You made a choice, and now I'm making mine. It's over. Please," he whispered desperately, the desperation raw in his voice. "I'll fix this, Abby. Lucas promised he'll make things right." My heart twisted painfully at his continued excuses. "It's too late, Nate. You betrayed my trust and put my grandmother's legacy at risk. I can't marry someone who could do that to me." Silence again, heavy and unbearable. Eventually, he whispered hoarsely, "So that's it? You're just throwing us away?" "You already threw us away," I replied sharply, anger mixing painfully with grief. "You just expected me to accept it." He sighed heavily, defeated. "I'm so sorry, Abby. I wish you'd give me another chance. I gave you everything, Nate. You abused it," I whispered painfully. "Goodbye." Hanging up, tears finally overflowed, grief mixed with relief. I had made my choice. It was painful, heartbreaking even, but necessary. But ending the engagement wasn't enough. Nate had jeopardized Eleanor's house, and I wouldn't rest until her legacy was safe again. That afternoon, I scheduled an appointment with one of Vermont's top property attorneys, determined to reverse Nate's reckless actions. Walking into attorney Margaret Holloway's office the next day felt surreal. Margaret was a sharp, confident woman in her 50s, known locally for her assertive style and relentless advocacy. She greeted me warmly but professionally, her presence immediately reassuring. "Miss Carter," Margaret began, gesturing toward a chair. "I've reviewed the documents you sent over. Legally, this situation is challenging, but not impossible." Relief flooded me instantly. "Can we reverse the mortgage?" Margaret nodded thoughtfully, leaning forward. "Given the circumstances, Nate adding himself to the deed under misleading pretenses, we have a strong argument to contest the validity of the mortgage. But it won't be easy." "Whatever it takes," I said resolutely. "Eleanor trusted me. I owe it to her." Margaret smiled approvingly. Good. You'll need determination. Nate's family will likely push back, but I'm confident we can build a solid case. Keep records of everything, communications, transactions, any conversations related to this. The more evidence we have, the stronger your position. Leaving Margaret's office, hope buoyed me slightly. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of control over my life again. Yet news traveled fast in our small town, and the cancellation of the wedding unleashed a tidal wave of reactions. Friends and neighbors whispered behind my back, sympathetic but judgmental, unsure whether to pity or blame me. Nate's family rallied fiercely, openly criticizing my decision. Even my parents quietly questioned whether I'd acted rashly. One evening, returning home after work, I found Nate sitting on Eleanor's porch, looking weary and desperate. He stood as I approached, hands raised defensively. "I know you don't want to see me, Abby, but please hear me out." I sighed heavily, reluctantly pausing. "Make it quick." "Lucas feels terrible," Nate began earnestly, eyes pleading. "My parents offered to repay the loan gradually. We can still fix this." Frustration surged within me. "That's not the point, Nate. You still don't understand. It's not just about money, it's about trust and respect, neither of which you showed me." He exhaled shakily. "I messed up, Abby. I betrayed your trust. I admit that fully. But I love you. Doesn't that count for something?" "Love doesn't erase betrayal," I replied quietly, sadness permeating every word. "You didn't value me enough to be honest. You sacrificed my grandmother's home, my legacy, for Lucas. That's something I can't forgive." Nate's shoulders slumped defeatedly. "I never thought I'd lose you like this." "You didn't just lose me," I said softly, firmly. "You pushed me away. I deserve someone who respects me and Eleanor's memory." "You're not that person." Nate nodded slowly, finally understanding the finality of my decision. Without another word, he turned and left, his figure disappearing into the gathering dusk. That evening, sitting alone in the quiet stillness of Eleanor's home, the weight of my decisions settled heavily. Yet despite the pain and loneliness, something shifted profoundly within me. I was no longer the passive victim of Nate's choices, I'd reclaimed my voice, taking back control. Eleanor would have been proud. Her lessons echoed softly through my mind, her unwavering strength guiding me forward even now. I would fight relentlessly, legally and emotionally, to secure her legacy, no matter the cost. Though the path ahead remained uncertain, one thing was clear: standing firm in my convictions was worth any struggle. Eleanor had raised me to be strong, resilient, and true to myself. Her legacy wouldn't be tainted by betrayal or deceit. For the first time since Nate's betrayal, clarity illuminated my path forward. Though painful, canceling the wedding and fighting back wasn't merely necessary, it was empowering. Enough was enough, and I was finally ready to fight. The legal process began in earnest just days after that final encounter with Nate. Margaret Holloway, my attorney, was relentless in her pursuit of justice. She wasted no time filing a civil claim against Nate, contesting the mortgage on the grounds of fraud, misrepresentation, and undue influence. The case centered around the deceptive nature of how Nate got his name on the deed in the first place, under the guise of tax advantages and trust. Margaret believed, and I agreed, that he'd used emotional manipulation to gain partial ownership, knowing full well he planned to use the house to bail out his brother. While the legal gears slowly turned, I focused on regaining control of my life. But deep inside, a gnawing anger refused to fade. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. Not only had Nate risked the one thing in the world I valued most, but now his family and some members of our community had taken to treating me like I was the villain for standing up for myself. The pressure had turned into open gossip, snide comments about how I'd overreacted and embarrassed Nate publicly. Others said I didn't understand family loyalty. I was done staying silent. I had been the one betrayed. I had been lied to. And I wasn't going to let Nate or anyone else control the narrative. One quiet Saturday morning, I sat at Eleanor's desk with my laptop open, staring at the blinking cursor on a blank social media post. I had gone back and forth for weeks on whether I should say anything. But now, something inside me snapped, the weight of everything finally tipped into resolve. I began typing. This is not the post I ever thought I'd make, but after weeks of rumors, whispers, and outright lies, I've decided to speak my truth. Not for pity. Not for revenge. But for clarity and closure. I continued, detailing everything. How my grandmother had left me her home, how Nate had convinced me to add his name under false pretenses, how I discovered the secret mortgage, how he'd used it to pay off his brother's gambling debts without even telling me. I didn't sugarcoat the betrayal. I didn't exaggerate it either. He mortgaged the house I inherited from my grandmother to pay off his brother's $200,000 gambling debt. I found out by accident. He never intended to tell me. He said it would have been ours anyway after the wedding, as if that justifies financial deceit. I explained the lawsuit, the cancelled wedding, the heartbreak. I closed the post with the one decision that became the final piece of poetic justice. So I cancelled the wedding. And I sold the ring. He gave me a $15,000 engagement ring. I pawned it last week for $5,500, less than half what it was worth, but more than enough to help fund the legal fees I'll need to get my grandmother's house back. I don't want revenge. I want freedom. I want peace. And most of all, I want people to know that betrayal doesn't get to be rewritten as sacrifice just because someone says it's for family. I hit post. Then I closed the laptop and walked away. I didn't expect what came next. The post exploded. Within 24 hours, it had over 40,000 shares. People across the country, complete strangers, filled my inbox with messages of support, encouragement, and even personal stories of their own betrayals. Women from small towns and big cities, young and old, wrote to me saying, "I wish I'd had the courage to do what you did." The outpouring of empathy and validation was overwhelming and empowering. Nate, of course, wasn't thrilled. He tried to call me the day after the post went viral. I didn't answer. Then came the text. "You didn't have to humiliate me." I stared at the message for a long time before finally replying. "I didn't humiliate you, Nate. You did that to yourself. I just told the truth." He didn't respond after that. But his family did. Carol, his mother, left a passive-aggressive comment under the post. There are always two sides to every story. To which hundreds of people replied on my behalf. And she just told hers. Loud and clear. In the following days, I learned Nate's professional reputation had taken a hit. Apparently, one of his company's clients saw the post and asked questions. His employer opened an internal review into his conduct, particularly whether any funds had been mishandled in his role as a financial analyst. I didn't revel in it, but I also didn't feel sorry. Actions have consequences. Meanwhile, Margaret's case against him gained momentum. With the exposure from the post, more people came forward, including a former college girlfriend of Nate's who privately messaged me to say, "I wish I'd spoken out sooner." He did something similar to me, talked me into co-signing a loan for his brother, then ghosted me when I needed him most. We filed that communication as supplemental character evidence in our legal case. Margaret was thrilled. And with each passing day, I felt lighter. Stronger. Sharper. The money from the ring covered our initial legal fees, and I used the rest to pay off lingering credit card debt. It wasn't just about the money, it was symbolic. That ring had once represented a promise, a future. Now, it funded my freedom. People sometimes asked if I missed Nate. If I ever wondered what could have been. I didn't. What I mourned was the future I'd imagined, the one I had carefully built in my heart, not the one Nate had secretly rewritten behind my back. That vision died the moment I found that mortgage document. And I'd buried it with the ring. By the end of the month, my story had become something else, the movement, almost. I was invited to speak on a podcast about financial abuse in relationships. Local news outlets reached out for interviews. I declined most. My story was already out there, and I was done reliving it. But I did say one thing in one interview that I hoped everyone, especially women, would hear. Your love is not a blank check. Trust is not unconditional when someone actively works to destroy it. You're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to take back what's yours. You're allowed to say, enough. And that's exactly what I had done. Enough. After the storm came a strange, almost eerie quiet. The media interest faded, the legal proceedings trudged on in the background, and I was left in the stillness of my grandmother's house, my house, grappling with everything I had endured. And even as the world moved on, I remained frozen in a strange limbo between grief and healing. The online support had been overwhelming at first, comforting, empowering, even addictive. But as the viral post aged, the comments grew more divided. Strangers who had once cheered me on began arguing amongst themselves in the threads. Some said I was brave. Others called me vindictive. The post had reached millions. That many opinions come with weight. The real-life consequences were even heavier. Nate had left town. Word around the neighborhood was that he'd moved back in with his parents in Boston after being asked to resign from his job. I didn't know whether the social fallout, the online backlash, or the internal review at his company was the final nail in the coffin. Probably all of the above. I wasn't proud of what happened to him, but I also wasn't sorry. Actions have consequences. I learned that the hard way. What surprised me more was how my own family reacted. My parents, who had initially encouraged me to forgive and work it out, weren't exactly thrilled about how public everything became. My mom called me shortly after the post went viral. "You've always been so private, Abby," she said, hesitating. "I just don't understand why you felt the need to go so public with it all." I sighed into the phone. Because no one was listening when I kept it private, Mom. Everyone told me to be quiet, to move on, to forgive. Going public was the only way to reclaim my story. "But was it worth it?" she asked gently. I paused. It wasn't an easy question. "I don't know yet," I replied honestly. Because truthfully, the victory hadn't come without cost. I had lost not just a fiancé, but the future I had once imagined so vividly. The little family I thought I was building. The in-laws I had come to care for. Even some friends I had known for years quietly drifted away, either uncomfortable with the attention or disagreeing with my choices. And still, deep in my bones, I knew I had done the right thing. The lawsuit against Nate was progressing, albeit slowly. Margaret, ever the relentless professional, was building a solid case. With the help of the evidence we gathered, emails, texts, and character references from people who knew Nate's history, we were confident in our argument to remove him from the deed and challenge the mortgage as fraudulently obtained. Nate didn't even fight it at first. After the public backlash, he tried to stay quiet. But then his family stepped in. Carol and Richard Reynolds hired their own lawyer and attempted to frame the situation as a misunderstanding between engaged partners, arguing that the mortgage had been a necessary family bailout, agreed upon tacitly through shared assets and intent to marry. It was laughable, except it wasn't funny. They were trying to twist my silence into consent. They wanted to invalidate my pain by rewriting history. Fortunately, Margaret was prepared. "I've seen cases like this before," she told me after filing the response. People using emotional leverage to manipulate their partners into silence, then acting like silence equals agreement. "But the court will see through it. You took action fast, you documented everything, and you've been consistent. They don't have a leg to stand on." Her confidence was a balm to my anxious mind. But even with her reassurance, I couldn't help the waves of self-doubt that would creep in late at night. When the house was too quiet, and the ghosts of old dreams came whispering back, I would find myself replaying every moment, every decision. I'd lie awake wondering, was I too harsh? Did I act out of emotion? Could this have ended differently? And every time, I came to the same conclusion. No. This wasn't just about a house or a ring. It was about being deceived by someone I trusted completely. It was about being told my values didn't matter, that someone else's crisis took priority over my autonomy and the legacy my grandmother had entrusted me with. It was about drawing a line and refusing to let anyone cross it ever again. I'd fought for something sacred, not just to me, but to every woman who's ever been told to shrink, to forgive, to accommodate. I was done shrinking. A few weeks later, I got a letter from Eleanor's old neighbor, Mrs. Halloway, who had known our family since before I was born. In loopy cursive, she wrote, "Your grandmother would be so proud of you. She always said you had her fire." That made me cry more than anything else. Because that's what I needed to hear, not from strangers online, not from lawyers or reporters, but from someone who had known Eleanor. Someone who knew what she stood for. Her belief in me wasn't a fantasy, it was real. And I was living proof of it. The garden Eleanor once tended was blooming again. I'd poured myself into reviving it this spring, coaxing the roses and hydrangeas back to life. Every thorn, every petal, felt like a small act of defiance. Life was moving forward. So was I. I began journaling again. Long walks through the woods near the house became daily rituals. I started volunteering at the library and reconnected with old friends who'd quietly supported me from the sidelines. Slowly, the ache began to dull. I even started dating again, not seriously, just coffee dates and small conversations, enough to remind myself that this chapter didn't have to define me forever. One afternoon, sitting on the porch swing Eleanor had always loved, I thought back to the night I found that mortgage paperwork. The betrayal. The confrontation. The heartbreak. And the fire that followed. I remembered something my grandmother once told me, during one of those long summer nights under the stars. You'll be tested, Abby. You'll be tempted to give your heart to the wrong people. But don't ever let someone else write your story. You're the author. She was right. I had reclaimed my story, not perfectly, not painlessly, but fully. And as the breeze stirred the wind chimes above me, I whispered into the quiet. I kept my promise, Grandma. I think she heard me. AITA for selling the engagement ring, canceling the wedding, and posting the whole story online after my fiancé secretly mortgaged my inheritance to pay his brother's debt? Because even after everything, sometimes I still wonder.